Rules and regulations, laws and mandates. Our lives are full of them. Some are helpful, most seemingly not so much. There are some financial rules of thumb that can be very helpful, like the Rule of 72. We looked at the Rule of 72 in another video. We went over the basic math of the rule. Today we'll dive a little deeper and look at some scenarios where the rule could come in handy in everyday life. First though, a quick recap. The Rule of 72 is used to estimate how many years it takes to double your money if you know the rate of return. For example, you expect to earn 6% on a particular investment. Take 72 and divide it by the rate of return, in this case 6%, and you get 12. That's 12 years. It would take about 12 years to double your money at a 6% rate of return. We also looked at figuring out the rate of return you'd need to earn if you knew when you needed your money doubled. For example, you've got $10,000 set aside for a $20,000 boat, and you want to buy it in 7 years. You need to double your money in 7 years. What rate of return will do that? Take 72 and divide it by the number of years to get the required rate of return. 72 divided by 7 equals 10.2. So you need to make about 10% a year to double your money in 7 years. So that gives you a starting point on researching what kind of investment you need to potentially make that kind of return with. Another way to use the Rule of 72 is comparing risk versus reward. Let's say you like the perceived safety of an interest-bearing account, or CD, earning 2%. But you know if you invested in some of the great companies of America, you could potentially earn a lot more. Not guaranteed, of course, and not without some volatility. But let's say you could earn 7%. How long would it take to double your money in each choice? The 2% interest account would take, 72 divided by 2 equals 36. That's 36 years to double your money. You could be a grandpa by then. And the 7% would double in, it's 72 divided by 7, 10.2. About 10 years to double at 7%. That's a big difference between 10 years and 36 years. But to be fair, there's also a big difference in expected volatility and price fluctuation along the way, what people like to call risk. If you're evaluating investments, there's no right or wrong answer. Everyone's situation is unique, as are their comfort levels with taking risk. Which leads me to another type of risk and the Rule of 72. Inflation. Inflation risk, the loss of purchasing power. If you know the inflation rate, you can use the Rule of 72 to figure out the time it takes to lose your purchasing power or have it cut in half. In other words, $1 million today ain't going to be $1 million down the road. But how far down the road for $1 million to only buy $500,000 worth of groceries? If inflation is 8%, as it was during parts of 2022, it won't take long. 72 divided by 8 is 9. 9 years to cut your $1 million in half. You'd still have $1 million, but they'd only be worth $500,000. Your purchasing power gets cut in half in 9 years. All right, if we're back around 3% inflation, then your purchasing power gets cut in half in 24 years. 72 divided by 3 is 24. Whew, that feels a little better, doesn't it? Or does it? Let's say you're checking out of the 9 to 5 around age 60. 24 years puts you at what? 84? Still got enough for your money to be working only half as hard? And if we got back to that prior example of comparing investments and rates of return, the one where the fixed rate of interest seems safer, at a 3% inflation rate, it seems to me a 2% rate of return is losing money, at least the loss of purchasing power. If you're not outpacing inflation, you're losing purchasing power. Was it really safer or just less volatile? That's another way to use the Rule of 72 to determine risk and reward. Remember, A rule of thumb is just an estimate. It's not scientifically and mathematically correct. It's not set in stone and doesn't mean real life will play out that way. All right, here's the actual equation if you want to calculate it. Not me, that's over my head and beyond my accuracy interest level. The rough estimate is good enough for our purposes. We'll look at more rules and financial rules of thumb coming up.